Welcome to the Cinema Psycho Show, the madhouse for film freaks and film fans of all types. I'm your host, Brian Coddington, joined by my fellow co-host and filmmaker, John Woolscroft.
This is my most spiritual podcast episode ever.
Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. This is going to be a fun episode. One, I don't think, John, that we have ever done a double feature on this podcast. We've done retrospectives, but we have never done a double feature, right?
Well, interestingly, I mean, yes, but I think other than Dune, and that was only because we decided to be ironic and watch the Lynch one instead of the Dune Part 1 that came out. This is I think our first conversation ever on David Lynch.
It is. And that is crazy, especially for us, because a lot of people don't know this, but John is a massive David Lynch fan.
Indeed. Yes.
Indeed. One, he's got, I'd say, the best impression of David Lynch out there, which you just heard. And there have been oftentimes that John has thrown that impression around on the podcast and off the podcast, and I always bust out laughing because it's on point. Okay, totally on point. But yeah, unfortunately, we're drawn to David Lynch because of his untimely passing. R.I.P. David Lynch. John, did this one hit you pretty hard, being a big Lynch fan?
Yeah. I mean, look, death comes for us all, Oroko Saki. But this one,
Turtles reference. I didn't see that one coming.
But I mean, yeah, was he 76? Sure, but that still seems a little too young for him to go, especially since he seemed in otherwise perfect health. So, like, I don't know the man's personal life. He could have been struggling for all I know. But when these deaths kind of pop out of nowhere, like this one kind of hit me, not the same as George Romero, but like, it's like, I didn't know he was sick. So it's just like when he died, I'm just like, it's like just absolutely being, kicked in the stomach.
Yeah, I mean, I had read an article that he had kind of just been kind of confined to his house because of health issues. I had come out like a month or so ago, but I had no idea that he was this ill. And it was a shock. I mean, this is someone who, you look at films that, from going all the way back to The Elephant Man and Eraserhead, and he has, like George Romero, I think, claimed a certain corner of cinema that really was kind of in the realm. If I had to say someone who was contemporary to him on another medium, would be like Salvador Dali. I view David Lynch as the Salvador Dali of cinema.
Yeah, I would say very much on a commercial end. And yes. I mean, somebody could argue how commercial is David Lynch. I mean, people know his movies, whether they've seen them or not.
He captured the nation in the early 90s with a TV show that was so fucking out there. So
that absolutely changed and revolutionized television.
It changed and revolutionized television. Yeah. A lot of people point to The Sopranos changing and revolutionizing television. Let's be honest here. Twin Peaks was the thing that made it so that The Sopranos could walk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's an old saying about genius, and I don't mean to fillate the corpse of David Lynch here, but I'm going to.
Fillate away, John.
Is that pure genius is that everything before it seems incidental and everything after it copies it. So I would say that about David Lynch, but I was saying was that, there are lots of experimental filmmakers, but nobody on the level of mainstream notoriety is David Lynch. And just doing a couple of notes here, I saw this very interesting breakdown of the adjective Lynchian, which came into use to describe works or situations reminiscent of his art, with the Oxford English Dictionary noting his penchant for juxtapositioning surreal or sinister elements with mundane everyday environments, and for using compelling visual imagery to emphasize a dreamlike quality of mystery or menace. And I thought, simplification, but very well put.
I would say fucking weird shit in everyday situations. Yeah, that's it. Weird fucking shit in everyday situations. But today, we are picking two of out of this man's amazing repertoire of films. We did talk about Dune, so if you do want to watch that one or listen to that one, check our back catalog. It's classic David Lynch, but I would say not nearly as Lynchian, if you will,
Yeah.
as the two that we're talking about today. These two are the two films that I think he is most remembered by. I mean, you could argue that Lost Highway is also one, but I think when people think of David Lynch, they're thinking of Blue Velvet and they're thinking of Mulholland Drive.
Yeah.
Those two really are, I think, if you had to distill who David Lynch is as a filmmaker, they come down to these two neo-noir films that really kind of laid the groundwork for the appreciation of David Lynch that we have now.
I mean, I would also throw in there Twin Peaks too, but we don't really do TV.
Right, we
here,
don't do
so,
TV.
yeah.
I would throw. I look at Blue Velvet almost as a proto Twin Peaks, personally.
That's fair. There's a lot of similar elements there going on. But what I find so fascinating about Blue Velvet is, and I mean, I may be reaching here, but I've done my homework a bit, is that this film is a breakdown of the id, the ego, and the super ego, in a sense that Kyle MacLachlan is the ego, uh, Dennis Hopper. Okay, I'm trying to think of his name now. Frank
Booth.
Frank Booth. Yeah, he is the id, and the sheriff, Laura Dern's father, is the super ego, and it's kind of a breakdown of that process and the idea beyond the pleasure principle that you need to get dirty to understand the clean.
Interesting. I view it in a little bit different way, which this is one of the best parts about talking about David Lynch and David Lynch films, is that his films open themselves up to so much interpretation. So much interpretation. So I definitely see your perspective on the id, the ego, and superego. I look at it more from the side of socio kind of analyzing of this thing, which is the town of Lumberton, which is the main setting of this, has basically two levels. And that if we look at our society as a whole, there is always a veneer and then an area underneath it that is dark, that is dingy, that is crime-ridden, that is corrupt. And those two cannot exist without each other. You cannot have the bright, shining world without a dark and decrepit world at the same time. And this film, Blue Velvet especially, kind of is that distilled into a 90-minute movie.
And he's not inferring that one is fake and one is true.
I'm saying they're both true.
Balance. Yeah.
Like, Lumberton presented in the first couple minutes of this movie is the idyllic 1950s small town where you've got, the firefighter waving as he goes by. It's bright, it's sunny, there's not a cloud in the sky, and everything is beautiful and everything is happy and everything is fine. It's small town living, right? We're always led to believe that small towns are like, the idyllic American kind of ideal. But beneath it is the antithesis of it. It's the opposite. It is corrupt, it is crime-filled, and it is everything that the idyllic isn't. And that crime-ridden side supports the idyllic. You even have the police officer in it who is kind of dividing between both worlds, supporting the idyllic with the crime, right? He steals drugs off of criminals that get shot to support Frank Booth and Ben. And all of that goes to support the economy of Lumberton. So I love that. And one thing I wanted to mention is, I also view the idea of the disease. Like, did you catch that in this film? This is something that I didn't get the first time I saw this, but the second time I watched it, it kind of hit me. And the concept of disease in this movie is mentioned a couple times. And I kind of interpreted this as the disease of abuse, debauchery, violence, corruption, all of that that exists kind of in this darker world actually kind of grab hold of characters in this. So like Frank and Ben represent this disease. Jeffrey in his whole pursuit of the truth after finding a human ear gets infected by this disease. And Dorothy, Isabella Rossellini's character, she kind of has been infected by this disease over just the abuse from Frank and everybody else. And the fact her husband's been kidnapped and her kid's been kidnapped. So she's in this world of the disease. And the disease is even mentioned when she is like, nude and beaten down towards the end of the movie, when she says, he put his disease in me. And you could make the argument that, okay, well, they're talking about something else. I look at it as, well, no, the disease might be his disease of not being that.
Mm-hmm.
The disease of being hope coming from that idyllic side. It's just, it's interesting. This whole movie is just batshit Looney Tunes in terms of meaning.
Well, it's interesting that David Lynch says that one of his favorite films and what everything comes back to is The Wizard of Oz. And while Wizard of Oz has kind of like a more wholesome introduction into a dreamlike world that changes somebody, that is like Blue Velvet is that, but on like acid and steroids and madness. It's like everybody kind of enters this dream world that they didn't know below the surface. And unlike Dorothy, who kind of comes out for it the better, uh everybody comes out scarred and damaged, maybe irreconcilably.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we already like lost all of our people by going into all the meaning. They thought they were gonna get dick and fart jokes. No, none of that. This is one of those ones where John and I put our professor hats on and we pull out our 2 degrees.
She had spew velvet. I don't know.
There you go. There you go. You're trying. Just don't try so hard. But John, was this the first time you saw this movie? Have you seen this movie before?
I initially saw it on my own, and then it was knocked my table here for those watching the video. But it was also shown in film class and undergrad, and it's not an easy watch, but I'd say I've probably seen it maybe 12 to 15 times in my life. Every couple of years, let's throw on Blue Velvet and see if it's still, a complete and total masterpiece. And for me, it always is.
Yeah, I had discovered this film when I first started when I first started to have friends who were into movies, and it was before I went to college, like probably like junior or senior year, and they were always like, "Oh, dude, you got to see Blue Velvet." I'm like, "What the fuck is this?" Like, if it's not a horror movie, I don't want to watch it. Kind of still a little bit like that.
Yeah.
But I eventually watched like parts of it, and that's kind of how it always was for a while. Was okay, you see parts of it because it would pop up on HBO, and I'd see a clip here to there. But it wasn't until like a couple years ago when I actually like sat down and I watched the whole movie through and through, and was just absolutely blown away by it. I'm like, man, this is a movie that doesn't get talked about nearly as much as I think it should. But then watching it again for this episode definitely like reinforced that feeling that this movie really is a masterclass in storytelling and also a masterclass in trying to communicate tension in a way that isn't ham-fisted. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just I was just looking it up real quickly. There are films that come along that that just absolutely blow people away. I think a younger generation now will giggle, but there was a time where Quentin Tarantino absolutely reinvented the wheel with popular cinema with Pulp Fiction and everything. But 1986, I mean, some of the other movies with Friday the 13th, Part 6, Poltergeist 2, Short Circuit. I mean, Short Circuit. So I'm not saying all these movies are bad, but you know, getting to the late 80s were not the greatest time for movies. And to have somebody like David Lynch, he certainly wasn't the new kid on the block. He had already, made a Razorhead, Elephant Man, Dune, and what have you. But just this movie was like a shock to the system that was like, oh, this is something we needed in the way like Star Wars was, or Pulp Fiction or what have you.
And I think he made this right after Dune, right?
Yep. Yeah, I'm not gonna make this crap anymore. I'm gonna do my own films.
Well, I wonder if it's a thing where because he made Dune, that De Laurentiis group who produced this film, distributed the film, basically like said, okay, you made our Dune movie, we'll make your little art house film.
Yeah. Yeah, it was like, yeah, we
that's a common tactic, right? Make the movie we want that we spend a crap ton of money on retaining the rights to, and then you can make your movie.
Yeah, they're going to make it a weird rapey movie with a little ear in the field.
A weird rapey movie, horrible. Some of these scenes are really, by the way, if you watch this movie, I've never seen this. Some of these scenes are really hard to watch. Like,
this movie's brutal.
It's very brutal, and especially scenes with Frank Booth, played by Dennis Hopper, brilliantly. I really think he's probably the most evil character ever put on cinema. Like, just ever. Like, I know we've had evil characters in movies. Like, a lot of people say, "Oh, well, what about Art the Clown?" Okay, sorry, it's different. Okay, this is a person that exists in reality. Like, that's, I think, what makes this scary, is that we've all known a Frank Booth, right?
Yeah, and it's all about like tone with movies too. It's like, people, oh, Darth Vader is the greatest villain of all time. Yeah, for that particular type of movie, but in terms of just like unsettling evil, you're not going to see somebody in a big Frank Booth costume at Disney World passing out popcorn to kids,
I don't know if you're going to see a Frank Booth cosplayer. Like, I don't even think you'll see that. I don't think anyone's just, chomping at the bit to say, oh, yeah, you know what? I got my gas tank here, my mask, my Roy Orbison costume here, and I'm just going to go ahead and be Frank Booth. No one wants to be him. But he also, and this is just a testament to Lynch himself, he makes Frank a mesmerizing character. And I think that's this power in this, is that we despise this person so much that every moment this person's on screen, we just want to punch his face. And like, there are times when you watch this movie that you're just like, can someone like kill Frank right now? And that's a testament to Dennis Hopper. It's a testament to David Lynch's directing. It's a testament to the writing, because he makes him a character that we loathe, but we're drawn to it. And that's interesting.
Yeah. Now, do you think that David borderlines on too far with this? Because a lot of, shall we say, esteemed critics thought that this movie was just perversely intense. And your good buddy Roger Ebert called him a misogynist for this movie.
That's a very good question. I often wonder, with a lot of movies that came out at this time, whether or not they would be nearly as effective if they had toned down elements in them. In this case, I think it would hurt this film to do that, because we have to communicate to the audience that this is not someone you're supposed to root for. And how do you make them so unlikable and so disgusting and so vile than to present them in that way? And I mean, Frank in this movie basically, sexually assaults Dorothy Valens, played by Isabella Rosselini.
She's his sex slave.
She's a sex slave. And he clearly has psychological issues where he kind of devolves into, committing basically, incest. Like he's got incest fantasies with this. Really disgusting shit. But I go back to, is this a same situation as, say, Last Tango in Paris? I don't think it is.
No.
I don't think it is. Unless maybe I'm wrong. Isabella Rosselini, tell me, was it like that? Was it like Last Tango in Paris?
I actually do believe that I read, she said that, like, she doesn't know where certain people like Roger Ebert get off. She's like, I know the script. I consented to everything. I didn't have any issues with it. So yeah, I did the film. Like, don't go to be my savior when I didn't ask you to be in the first place.
That's good. That's a good point. And that proves my point. I don't see this movie in the same realm as that. Last Tango in Paris, now that we know what we know that it was very, very disgusting. Not only in the movie, but on the set. And that's neither here nor there. I don't think they're in the same boat. But I do think that as long as the actors are consenting, as long as the actors understand why they're doing this, why that sort of thing's there, then I think it's okay. Do I think this movie could be made now? Nope. No, I don't think it could.
Yeah. It would have to be significantly different, which would take away.
Well, let's be honest here, John. If you made this movie now, it would not be commercially successful at all. No. The only one I could think that might somehow be a little bit related would be the movie Room, where I'm forgetting the actress's name. She plays now
Captain Marvel,
Captain
Brie
Marvel.
Larson.
Yeah. Brie Larson. Where Brie Larson is.
We're not talking Tommy Wiseau here.
No, I'm not talking
Room.
The Room. I'm talking the movie Room.
Yeah.
Okay, where Brie Larson's character is abducted as a child, and she's sexually assaulted and rapes and basically bears her rapist baby while being confined to a room. That's probably as close as I'd say to Blue Velvet. It's missing a lot of the subtext that Blue Velvet provides, but similar material, especially when it comes to the character of Dorothy.
Can I just speak quickly to the 3 beers
you can speak to movie? All the beers.
Is that to go back to what I had said at the beginning, and hopefully what I can provide as a little bit of support for my theory is that we have Kyle MacLachlan drinking Heineken, something a little thoughtful but still approachable. We have the chief of police drinking Budweiser, the king of beers. He's at the top. And then you have Frank, who drinks Pabst Blue Ribbon. All of these different beers represent middle ground, higher thought, and anarchy in it. So, because David would never just add brands in his movie for no reason. He mentions these on purpose, I feel.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, I always viewed it as the Heineken represents the quote unquote like liberal aesthetic, the yuppie type culture of the 80s. And the Budweiser always kind of was like, yeah, that's the boomer, right? That's the boomer generation. That's kind of with that. But they're the wealthy boomer generation. That's the one that's kind of like, we keep to traditional standards here. We keep to traditional values. We keep to conservatism. But then you've got Pabst Blue Ribbon, which has always been, in my mind, the beer of, say, rebels and working class and maybe people who you might associate with, counterculture. I know when I used to go to a punk bar here in Pittsburgh, that would be the drink du jour that was always served, was PBR, Pabst Blue Ribbon. I like it. I thought it was good. But
yeah, it's
fine.
Yeah, that's a fine beer.
It's fine beer. It's a fine beer. I've never had Heineken. I've never really cared for that because I'm a millennial and we have far better beers nowadays, thanks to craft brewing. So I don't know. Maybe in Pittsburgh, I don't know. The Yingling would kind of be like the Bud, right?
Oh yeah.
What
Yeah.
would you say, John, would be the PBR Pabst Blue Ribbon beer of, say, Pittsburghers?
Icy Light.
Icy Light.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And what would be the Heineken?
I mean, do I dare say Rolling Rock?
Well, no.
because it's
I mean like
Pittsburgh-based
a
beers.
Pittsburgh like
Yeah.
I see it as a crafty beer. A
Yeah.
craft beer that everyone likes.
Oh, it might even just be something from Penn Brewery.
There you go.
Yeah.
That makes more sense. Because it's not nearly as good as like a microbrew or anything like that.
Yeah.
That has to be somewhat accessible. But yes, I could see people being like, "Oh, yes, well I got this from the microbrewer at Penn Brewery," the 5 people from Pittsburgh are like, "Yeah, fuck yeah, I agree with that." But I do want to talk a little bit about Lynch's ability to weave a story together in a really artful way. And I think a lot of filmmakers get bogged down in the details and miss the fact that they kind of have to come up with cause and effect in their story. And this was something that I noticed in both Blue Velvet, especially, and even in Mulholland Drive to some degree. Mulholland Drive's a little goofy. But John, did you notice that literally everything in this movie is a result of cause and effect?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, so much of this movie revolves around, if Kyle MacLachlan had just minded his own goddamn business, things wouldn't have happened here. But yeah, his
Well, not
dark
even that. I
curiosity
mean,
hit him.
not even that. I mean, think about it. If his dad didn't suffer a stroke while mowing the lawn, Jeffrey would not have dropped out of college to come back and look after his parents' hardware store, which
Yeah.
then led to him finding an ear in the field, which led to him meeting the detective who was his neighbor, which led to him meeting Sandy, who tells him about Dorothy, which led to him going to Dorothy's. So like everything in this movie is causality. It's cause and effect. There's not really anything in this film that kind of cuts away from that. And that's something that I don't see a whole lot of filmmakers really taking their time for. A lot of them build these grandiose plots, and it's like, no, you're missing the point that you have to have something happens to then lead to, and then what happens after that? Like there has to be a result to what came first. And it was kind of refreshing to see that after seeing a lot of movies that kind of lose the plot there.
There's a saying that you want to have, and because of that, instead of and then this happens. When you have and then this happens, it's not a cause and effect situation. But if you can say, so and so went to the store, and because of that, the wife got angry, whatever. It's it's that if you can say because of this next thing happened, then you're writing something in a cohesive narrative structure.
Yeah. No, it was something that I noticed in this movie, especially because I think here's the thing: if you're someone who's never really gotten to David Lynch films, Blue Velvet is a good introduction to it because it's fucking weird, but it's not too fucking weird.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like it's not so like out there. It's not Lost Highway weird.
Yeah,
Okay?
I would say this one you can follow it narratively.
Yeah.
But it has all the Lynch trademarks without being too Lynch. You can like Wild at Heart, you can follow that one. You can follow the narrative there, but that is him being extra fucking weird.
Yep.
But it's not like Inland Empire, Mulholland Drive, where it's like you need a goddamn
you need to have a guide with you.
Yeah, to understand what the fuck is happening.
You did have your local fellow Lynchian who comes by and says, okay, the blue box and the blue key represent this. The blue-haired lady at Club Silencio represents this. All that weird shit. Yeah. Hard to follow in those movies, but Blue Velvet kind of does a good job. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about the characters. We talked a little bit about Jeffrey. One thing we didn't mention, and I'm going to pull this from me putting on my Gen Z hat for a moment.
Yeah.
Jeffrey has the most riz out of every film character I've ever seen. This man has got riz out the ass.
He's got big dick syndrome.
Oh my God. We see his dick too, by the way.
Yeah.
Did you notice that?
Yeah. Hey, why'd you break into my house? Because I wanted to. I'm gonna suck your dick. Okay.
Okay. And my favorite is just like, I'm gonna start a whole relationship with this broken woman. Okay. And then I'm gonna also start a relationship with my neighbor's high school age daughter. And I'm gonna 2-time both of them.
He probably could have also banged like Laura Dern's dad in the movie. Just
Yeah,
like he
or
just
his
got
mom,
that energy.
her mom, like Sandy's mom. Could have just done that and just the whole town. But he's got riz up the ass. And I like, and it of course comes crashing down on him when Dorothy shows up in his house naked, beaten to hell, and just like arms extended, and then talks about how, Jeffrey put her disease in him, or he put his disease in her.
Frank did. Yeah.
No. I think it was Jeffrey did.
Oh, yes.
Jeffrey was talking about that. She was saying Jeffrey put his disease. He's my what would she call him? Her secret lover.
Secret lover. Yeah. That nice European way of referring to
it. And it's done right in front of his girlfriend.
Yeah.
That he just moments ago said, "I love you," and her mom.
This ain't what it looks like.
well, like Laura Dern's face in this whole scene, I cracked up laughing because it's like that. This weird. She does this weird mouth thing where like her bottom lip curls, and like it, and her top lip opens up really wide. It almost looks comical, but it's so weird. In this whole scene, the whole scene dynamics, because you've got Isabella Rosselini, who's buck ass naked, talking about secret lovers. Laura Dern is watching all of this happen. She's trying to stay like keep like a little bit of modicum of this poor woman's been beaten to shit, and Jeffrey's just sitting there like, fuck me.
I'm surprised he didn't talk the two of them into a three-way.
And the
mom watches.
Well, John, he gets away with it.
It's that hair, Brian.
He talks his way out of it in the next scene. And Sandy's like, "Oh, I forgive you for having an affair with a much older woman while also telling me that you love me." Man's got tons of riz.
It's that hair.
He's Cliff Vandercape in every movie. Only people who have watched the Flintstones movie will get that. Talked a bit about Frank. He's the most vile, despicable man in cinema history. Ben is an enigma wrapped in a riddle, played by Dean Stockwell.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on Ben, John?
Well, Ben is a completely duplicitous kind of character. He has a duality to him.
Oh, I call him a demure psychopath.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because he just presents kind of this visage of sophistication, but hidden behind it, kind of again like the town, is just sadism at its best.
Yeah. Well, because I think that there are levels and layers to characters in this. Like we have everyone from the complete innocent of Laura Dern to Kyle MacLachlan's character, who has an edge, like a desire for darkness. And then, you have, this character, Bet, who is basically both sides. And then you can get to the complete other end of things, with Frank, who is just nothing but batshit evil insanity.
Yeah, totally. But here's the thing: the minutes that Dean Stockwell has on screen, he steals those minutes. There's not a whole lot of people in this movie who can actually upstage Frank in this, but Dean Stockwell, I think, does a good job. His whole the candy colored clown that is the Sandman scene, iconic. Really good.
Well, I'm surprised that Kyle MacLachlan didn't ask him why he hasn't leaped yet. Yeah. I don't want to be in this universe.
Well, Al never leaped, okay? Al never did the leaping. It was always Scott Bakula who did the leaping.
Yeah, but just like Kyle,
Ziggy
Kyle
says, I
MacLachlan.
gotta kidnap Dorothy's kid and her husband.
This is a horrible universe. I don't want to be in
This is a horrible universe. Why isn't Scott doing this one? This
Last
is
time
why I
I was
don't
a
want to be in this.
wrestler.
Yeah. We're old. No one else knows what the fuck quantum leap is. You and I do because we're old as shit. Oh fuck. I gotta ask you this because obviously, we talked a little bit about this movie, and I want to move on to Mulholland Drive because it's a double feature after all. What's your favorite scene in Blue Velvet?
Not to sound like a complete fucking pervert here, but it was more because it was just so damn shocking. The first time that I got sorry calling him by Jeffrey is in the closet, and Frank comes in and he's forcing Isabella Rosselini to like spread her legs open, and he's breathing into his oxygen tank, and I was like, I thought I had seen a lot with if I film at that point in my life, even though I was just still a teenager, but that one was like, holy shit, this filmmaker's dangerous, and I kind of like it. So
That's a good pick. I mean, the one that's so tension filled because we already saw Jeffrey's buck ass naked, by the way, during this scene. He's hiding in a closet watching this happen. He's buck ass naked because Isabella Rossellini forced him to strip because he was creeping on her. And Frank shows up to, get his jollies off. And he's forced to watch this. So it's really that's a really hard scene. For me, though, my favorite, just because if you've never seen this movie, you don't know what the fuck's going to happen next, is the joyride scene. Is the whole sequence of Kyle MacLachlan's been found out. It's his first time he's been face to face with Frank. And the entire time we're waiting to see, okay, when is the shoe going to drop? We know as the audience, this is the man who cut off someone's ear. We've seen how depraved and violent this man can be. And our hero, who up until this point has been skating around by the skin of his teeth, is finally in a position where he might not make it out of this. And so the whole point from, hey, you want to go on a joyride, to if you get a bullet from me, you're fucking dead. A love letter from me, you're fucking dead. That right there was like, oh, so good. Just so good. Terrifying. It's a terrifying sequence because the tension gets ratcheted up again and again and again. And it kind of crescendos when Kyle MacLachlan finally gets some balls and he punches Frank in the face. Because at this point, we're like, oh, he's fucking dead.
Yeah.
Like I was convinced, I'm like, he's fucking dead.
Well, especially since his reaction just getting punched is just kind of like, hey, didn't even phase him. Just like,
well, his reaction is I don't think he's ever been punched before.
I mean, who would,
And I think the thing too is like, I think that Frank sees himself in Jeffrey to some degree. And I think as this movie goes by, Jeffrey is seeing parts of himself be infected by Frank. Like, I think they're two sides of the same coin. You could say that under certain circumstances, Jeffrey could become Frank.
He certainly seems to, have those darker tendencies, those desires.
Yeah. And he even says at one point, he's like, you're like me. He says, I remember that. I remember him saying that, like, you're like me. And I think that's what I'm saying. Like, their circumstances, their environment, their support structures, they're tied to the light side of this world is what kind of dictates whether they become like Jeffrey, who at the end ends up with Sandy, completely ignoring the fact that he two-timed her. and Frank is fucking dead. Like their circumstances led them to be who they are, but I think that they share a commonality in that they are drawn in by the darkness.
Um, two quick facts about this, and then I also just want to mention the ending very quick. Uh, sorry, Laura Dern. Sorry, I forgot her name for a second. Spacer. She had to leave college in order to go shoot this movie. She wasn't going to give up the opportunity at UCLA, and they would not give her a leave of absence. They basically said, if you go to do this movie, you're dropping out of school, and we're kicking you out. And so she went and
Shame,
made.
UCLA. Shame.
Yep. And she went and did this movie. She became a hugely successful actress, which I mean, she's probably going to do anyways because she's a nepo baby. But she is talented too. But but
That's right.
now,
Bruce Dern's her dad, right?
yep.
Okay.
But now UCLA requires an analysis of this movie to graduate from the university, from the film program.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I'm sure Laura Dern's like, fuckers. I'm assuming she eventually got her degree, right? Like she
Probably an
eventually got-
honorary degree. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
But
the other fun fact, Frank Langella missed out on the opportunity to play Frank, to the point where the next time he got a chance to work with David Lynch, he did for Lost Highway. And I don't know if it was after he read the script or after he saw a cut of the movie, he went, "What the fuck is this?"
yeah.
Yeah.
Lost Highway is one of those movies that it takes a couple watches to get into it. I still don't know what the fuck is going on in that movie.
I don't even
twice.
try. I don't even try, because something we'll mention to a degree with Mulholland Drive, although you can break that down, is that like it's okay to appreciate something on a sensory level.
Yeah.
David Lynch has that quite a bit. Not everything has to be what we consider our typical narrative structure. Like, again, as we mentioned at the top of the show, David is as close to a surrealist experimental filmmaker that we can get in a Hollywood level. So it's okay to feel his movies instead of always understanding them completely literally. But just to wrap it up, I thought the last shot, even though the bird is kind of hilariously cheap looking, when they're all looking at the bird at the end of the movie, and the bird goes and digs into the dirt and pulls up a worm, I thought that was just such a perfect symbolic ending of, you have to get a bit dirty to really understand the world. Like, you have to, and they've done that, and the bird represents conquering the darkness by defeating it, by pulling it out and being victorious over the worm that it eats.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's a very interesting callback to a conversation that Sandy had with Jeffrey about a dream she had where she viewed the world as darkness until I think she was a robins kind of erupted, and that represented kind of the light. So it's kind of a callback to it, and it's an interesting callback. And yes, that bird looks hokey as shit. When I was watching, I'm like, yeah, it's a fake looking bird. You only got one movement. That's back and forth.
Did you think some of like the Rockwellian stuff was almost laughable? Did you think that it was maybe too silly sometimes?
I mean, here's the thing, John. Like I tried to, like I do with all types of movies, try to understand what is the time period. And I think that's important. Like you have to know where you're at. And just like with Tim Burton's Batman, where you don't really know, I view this as kind of the same way, where you have a mixture of 1950s aesthetic, you have 1960s, 70s aesthetic. Like you also have contemporary 1980s in there. So, I mean, I look at Frank Booth and Ben and say like, well, that's the 70s. That's the gritty, 70s there. But then you also got like the Rockwell stuff. And I'm like, well, that's the 50s. So, I mean, I think if any other filmmaker tried this, it wouldn't work, but it's David Lynch. So there you go. I mean, can you imagine if they tried to make this a true representation of the 1980s, I don't think it would land as
Ugh.
well.
Yeah.
You know, you imagine if you saw like someone like people dressed like the Brat Pack back then, you know, or so it was looking like 16 Candles, and all of a sudden it's like, yeah, now we're gonna go to the dark underbelly side, and all it is a bunch of punk rockers. I'm like,
I do love these filmmakers that grew up in the 50s who are making movies in the 80s where all the villains are wearing like these leather jackets and like combing their hair back. It's like, no, those were your bullies.
those were your bullies.
Yeah,
Yeah. You're trying to bring that aesthetic to the 80s. It's not gonna work. Because the 80s villains were pop collars and polo shirts. We all know that, right? Like that's the real villain.
Yeah.
It's not the greaser.
See here, you ain't taking Brenda to the soda fountain.
Yeah, we're not going to Arlene's diner.
You're not taking her to the hopscotch dance.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, the house party scene is kind of indicative of that.
Yeah.
What was it, Brad? Was it Brad who was Sandy's like actual boyfriend? Is that his name? Yeah,
I believe so. Yeah.
And what I found funny was like when Jeffrey thought like, oh God, Frank's gonna kill me, and then he realizes it's Brad. He's like, yeah, no, he's small potatoes.
Yep.
You mean he's not gonna, sing me a Roy Orbison song and kiss me with lipstick all over his face and then say, if you get a love letter from me, it's a bullet and you're gone? Oh, it's just Brad and his goon squad. No worries. All right, well, that was movie number 1. Now we're moving on to something really fucking weird.
More ethereal, more dreamlike.
Well, some would say that this movie is Lynch's true masterpiece. After seeing both, and kind of if you look at the man's filmography, I really believe that this might be true. That if you wanted to say what is the highest point that David Lynch has done with this medium film, that's been successful, and I think it's Mulholland Drive. When, John, did you first see this movie? I just wanted to ask you that first.
Yeah, I would certainly say it's him with most, if not all, of his shackles off. But I saw this when I was getting into David Lynch because I got introduced first to Twin Peaks, and I found that show to be so fascinating that I went back when we had video stores, because we're olds. Is I just started watching the man's entire catalog, not in any particular order. It was just I would go and find like Eraserhead, and then I would find Mulholland Drive, and then Blue Velvet, then Lost Highway, or or what have you. So I would say around like 2004 or 5, it was just a couple years after it initially came out.
Yeah, I discovered this much later. I'll be the first to say that I was never a gigantic David Lynch fan until relatively recently. And when I say relatively recently, I mean like in the last 15 or so years. I never got into Twin Peaks. I never got into even Dune. Like I never was a big Dune fan until, I saw the 1984 version, in the mid 2010s. But I saw this film because of a person I was dating at the time, not my wife, was like, oh, you like movies? You should watch this. And we watched it, and I was like, I don't know what the fuck is happening, but it's beautiful. And honestly, I hadn't seen it since then, up until yesterday. And it was one because like I just, Mulholland Drive, along with his movies like Lost Highway, are movies that you don't just pick up and decide to watch on a Sunday afternoon, right, John? Like you're not gonna say, hey, you know what? I've got nothing going on. I think I'm gonna watch a David Lynch film.
Right. This isn't Predator or Sandlot or Rocketeer. Yeah, you don't just throw this on and take a nap.
Rocketeer's a good cut there. Rocketeer is one that you can watch anytime you're feeling down. If anytime you're bored, feeling down, watch Rocketeer. It's good watch.
It's not like, oh, WGN's running RoboCop 2 again. At 30 minutes in, I'll put it on.
Yeah, it's like we're watching it again.
Yeah.
It's same with Total Recall. I've seen Total Recall 1,000 times. If it's on TV, I'm gonna watch it again. But Mulholland Drive is a movie that you have to fucking pay attention to. It is one that is not really adept for modern audiences who try to do this thing, and I'm guilty of doing this myself, especially if I'm at home, where I try to watch the movie, then also look at my phone. John, are you guilty of that?
Yeah, it either comes down to um how much the movie's gripped me. If it's gripped me right away, I probably don't have too much trouble with my phone. But if it's something that I feel that I should get through, but I'm not really feeling it, yeah, I find myself just peeking down at it too much.
Well, even movies that grip me, like I know for me, and again, I think it's just because of our current culture, where we're tied to the hip to our phones, that we're kind of used to multitasking our entertainment, right? We'll watch a TV show while also scrolling through Facebook. That's kind of a common thing. And I think even when we watch movies, we're like, okay, yeah, I know what's going on. All right, let me go ahead and scroll through my thing. Okay, back to the movie. I know my wife and I do that all the time. This movie, though, you really can't do that at all. Like, this movie demands your attention. And if you don't give it your attention, you will be completely fucking lost. And I know for me, upon second watching of this last night, and I was like, I'm only going to watch half of it. I'll pick up, earlier today. And I ended up just sticking around and watching the full 2.5 hours. And boy, oh boy, I'm glad I did, because I definitely locked on to the story and what was actually happening. I know that if people tried watching this and doing their smartphone at the same time, it wouldn't work.
Yeah, this more recent movie, recent, it's about last 5, 6, 7 years. To compare it to would be The Lighthouse.
Yeah.
That movie you have to pay attention top to bottom. And I've seen people who have said, oh, Willem Dafoe's not even really there. It's all just Robert Pattinson. And then I've seen other people say Robert Pattinson is not even really there. It's just Willem Dafoe. And it's just like all these theories, and they're all they all have validity. They all have, I don't think Robert Eggers is as secretive as David Lynch is, but it's one of those things that there's so much you can decipher from this dreamlike world that I have my theory on it, but it's one of those things that I still can just appreciate it as kind of this surrealist emotional experience, that I don't have to know that if my theory is absolutely correct to appreciate what he does as a filmmaker.
Right. Well, I mean, let's dive into a little bit of Mulholland Drive here. So, for those who've never seen this movie is the story of a woman who barely escapes a killing. She barely escapes kind of getting shot, and kind of stumbles around the dark in the middle of Los Angeles, and kind of seeks shelter at an apartment that later is occupied by the niece of the person who owned the apartment, played by Naomi. Is it Naomi Watts?
Naomi Watts, yeah, playing
Naomi Watts, yeah.
Diane, the winner of the Jitterbug Dance Contest.
No, she's Betty at this point.
Oh, yeah.
She's Betty. Okay.
We got to keep these straight.
You got to keep this shit straight. Okay. And the beginning of the movie, she is Betty. And the woman is who has amnesia and doesn't know who she is. Her name is Rita. She just finds a poster on the wall in the apartment. And when Betty's like, what's your name? She just comes up with Rita because the name Rita Hayworth is on there. So
and behind that poster is a tunnel to Andy Dufresne's freedom.
And Rita climbed through a tunnel of shit and vileness like I've never seen to find her memories
that I don't want to even imagine. Oh no,
I don't want to even imagine.
Crawl through
Um,
piles of shit and piss in ways you don't want to fathom. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to have a cigarette.
yeah. But the first half is really just more of a mystery, right? Like actually it's not even necessarily the first half, it's the first 2/3 of the movie is a mystery in which the big mystery is who is Rita? What, who tried to kill her?
Yep.
Who tried to kill her? Who is Rita? And Betty, who kind of comes off as the consummate like starlet, rising starlet, who's just she's from the small town in Ontario. She's never been to Hollywood before. This is her first time. She's going to be a big star, and she kind of waltzes through this existence with Rita and ends up falling in love with Rita, which for its time is controversial.
Not in W's, America.
Well, yeah. I'm just saying, like, one of the things I saw during research for this movie, I was like, there were issues with the fact that this showed two women in an actual relationship that was sexual.
Yeah.
But it's like that was sexual. Like that was the thing. It's like, oh, a lesbian relationship. It's like, yeah.
Yeah, their boobies might touch. Can you imagine?
And problems? And I'm just going, if Rita was a dude, no one would care.
Yeah.
But this was 2001. Right?
Yeah, this is pre 9/11. This movie.
Yeah, this movie was pre 9/11. So that's the first half of the movie. It's really this mystery. And this, just like with Blue Velvet, each kind of thing leads to another aspect of this mystery. Eventually, Betty and Rita get the name of Diane, who they think that Rita actually is Diane. And they break into her apartment, and lo and behold, they discover a corpse, which comes back later. Okay, that's important.
Audience, are you starting to notice, if you haven't seen any of these movies, certain trends that David likes to play on?
Yeah, he likes corpses a lot.
Finding, body parts, dead people in the search of finding things, innocent
in search
people
of
finding
things.
Yeah.
Yeah. But while all that's going on, we're also introduced to a film director named Adam Kesher, who is basically being forced to cast an unknown starlet by the mob. And what's his story? Well, he discovers that Billy Ray Cyrus is fucking his wife. And in one of the best scenes of this movie, like, I love this movie. After watching this yesterday, I was like, this is funny. He finds his wife having sex with Billy Ray Cyrus. Billy Ray Cyrus, by the way, chillest guy ever.
Does not care at all that he's been outed.
He does not care. He's like, dude, don't treat your wife that way. I know I've been laying pipe to her, but hey, we're cool. And Adam just very calmly grabs her jewelry and dumps pink paint all over it, and then gets thrown out.
After gets his ass kicked by Achy Breaky Heart.
Yeah, he gets. And by the way, Adam is played by Justin Theroux. So, but this is not, Charlie's Angels full throttle Justin Theroux, who could probably take Billy Ray. I think he could take him. This is not buff guy. Justin Theroux.
He kind of reminds me, I mean, no connection because he wasn't even famous at this point, but he kind of reminds me of Eli Roth.
He does have a little bit of a vibe about him. Yeah. I do find it funny that he's carrying around a golf club in the beginning of this movie, and when he's meeting the mobsters, he decides, I'm just going to use that golf club and beat the shit out of their car. Which, I'm like, is that what directors do in the early 2000s? They carrying around a golf club just for shits and giggles? Like, is that a thing? But it made sense, for the story. But there's other characters in this movie that are introduced with really no connection throughout this. Like, you've got the hitman who doesn't know how to clean up his hit job. That's thrown in there.
Funny. Yeah.
I was laughing during that scene. So to set this up here, this hitman is talking to, and it's just a scene that's just thrown in, by the way. And that's one of the things that Mulholland Drive does, is it kind of throws things in that you're like, where's the connective tissue here? But this hitman he basically kills someone for a black book. And then while that's happening, he accidentally shoots his gun through a wall that hits an adjoining office, and a woman in the office gets hit in the ass. And he goes over and says, something jumped up and hit me in the ass. Which I'm like, that's a bullet.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was
And
a
so he
bullet,
has
wasn't the bitch you.
it was a bullet that bit you. But yeah, he has to kill her. While he's killing her, or struggling to kill her because she's a very large woman, the maintenance person sees this happening. So now he has to kill the maintenance person. The maintenance person gets shot, causes and causes his vacuum to start running. So he shoots the vacuum, causes it to light on fire, which causes then the sprinklers to go off and the alarms to go off in the building. It's kind of a Rube Goldberg of a scene. And it's wacky, but it's not played off for laughs. Like, we are the audience watching it's going, this guy can't catch a fucking break. There's also a cowboy that's introduced into it. Weird.
Well, see, the hitman, the cowboy, I mean, I don't know if I'm right, but I have theories on who all of these characters are and how everything that they relate to in the story.
Well, the back half of this, before we get to our theories, because I have my theories, and I'm curious what your theories are, John. But the back half of this movie kind of takes a 180, because it's revealed that the characters we had been following for 2/3 of the movie are actually other characters. So Betty becomes Diane, and Rita becomes what? Camilla?
Carmilla, yeah.
Carmela, yes.
Camilla, there's no R.
Camilla, yeah, Camilla. So they're two completely different characters, and it's kind of just thrown in there, like it's a moment in the movie where you're just like, what the fuck happened? Did someone splice two movies together? Because that's what it feels like. Like you had the part of so and so will now be played by this. Like, I almost was waiting for that. Like you would see in the Grindhouse films, the part of so and so is now played by this. But yeah, it throws you for a loop, because you're like, what is going on? And it's one of those things that if you haven't been paying attention, you really miss what's actually happening. At least for me, I know that the first time I watched it, I don't think I was paying nearly enough attention. Just because it was the first time seeing it, and I'm like, what do I expect? I don't know what to expect with a David Lynch film. And so watching it a second time for the podcast, I'm like, okay, I think I get it. I think I understand what's going on. But John, I want to ask you first, what is your theory about Mulholland Drive? What do you think we're actually witnessing?
So this is the end result of Diane's drug-filled nightmare purgatory, where she reinvents things, her entire history, where she becomes Betty and complete opposite of who she is, and everything that we see from the beginning of the movie is a complete rewrite in her own mind of who she is and who everyone else is around her. And the cracks start to happen where we start to see, reality seep in. And anytime that we know that we're completely in her dream world is when blue is an all-encompassing color in that situation. So I mean, I could give specific details. I probably should have written down like extensive notes, because this is that kind of movie. But I think the cowboy just represents like, like you're still in the dream world, boy. I can get you out, but like like Willie and The Simpsons. But yeah, he represents some kind of barrier there between her reality and this drug induced world she's created. So because everybody that connected with her, like the two old people, that are there with her at the airport, like everything's off about them. They don't seem like they're in reality. They seem hyper realistic, not hyper realistic, but hyper stylized, that like they're not natural. And I think seeing them at the end of the movie, what was a drug induced, she's brought back to the world, and that's when she decides to kill herself because she realizes that this shattered attempt at creating an idealistic world is not going to replace the terrible things that she's done by having her former lover murdered.
I tend to agree with pretty much your analysis of it. I think on a more simplistic level, because obviously, like this, as John mentioned, this is a movie that you could have a whole binder filled with subtext. Like literally, you could have a binder filled with this character is this. But I mean, for me, what I got out of it was that this is her history and her experiences mashed together. Kind of it reminded me a little bit of, when you fall asleep and you've got the TV on in front of you, that usually your dreams end up becoming mashed together with the sounds that you're hearing on the TV. Like I think everyone has experienced this, right? And you couple that with your dreams being playback of the day's events. So I look at this is the mashing together of Diane's entire history, like just augmented. There are elements in there that are based in reality, but the most part, it's all fantasy. Like I think that at one time she was similar to Betty, earlier in her history. I think the two old people are her parents. That's what I think. Because I think even in the beginning where the whole like jitterbug things happening, which it's completely out of left field. Like you might turn this movie on and be like, what the fuck is this bad green screen from 2000 like dancing sequence? But like you even get a moment where they shine on an overlay of Naomi Watts, and next to her are the two old people. So like I think they're her parents. I think they're mashed together. It's all mashed together. But I also think that when we jump to these other scenes where we're not featuring Betty and Rita, that's reality. Like, that's outside of it. I think the whole stuff with Adam is real. I think the stuff with the hitman is real because we're not interacting really with Betty or Rita at those times.
See, I thought I saw those as like her delusions to rationalize the kind of things that happened to her, like Mr. Hollywood or whatever his name is, the little person from
Oh yeah.
Twin Peaks. Is that like this? It's that type of reason that I didn't get the role when I was clearly better. It's all everybody's working against me. It's all a cabal against me, kind of thing. And you know, the
I think there's
hitman thing
nuggets
is
of
a little bit more
reality though.
confusing. Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Mhm.
I think there are, and this is done by Lynch to really disrupt the narrative flow in a way. But I really believe that those are like, especially the sequence where Adam is like getting kicked out of his house. Like, there's no interaction at all with Rita or Betty at all. So it doesn't make sense why this would be in her psyche. But at the same time, later in the film, when Diane is at the dinner party and Adam is regaling about, oh yeah, well she got the house or something like that, and we're like, he's referencing what had happened. I'm like, that's a moment of reality there. So were those parts where there was no direct interaction with Diane or Camilla, was that reality? And everything else with them featured was this dreamscape where reality and the dreams and her memories and her history are mashed together in this amorphous surrealist world. It's a beautiful concept, and honestly, like, it makes the return to reality all that much better because, you know, Betty turns into a horrible, horrible person. You know,
And did you notice?
heartbroken, but horrible.
Did you notice the waitress when she's planning the hit? Name tag says Betty
Yeah.
on there.
Yeah.
So
And that's what I'm saying. Like, I think that her existence is mashed together in this dreamscape. Whether it's drug fueled or not, I don't know. But I like, we're seeing the mashing of reality interspersed in this dream, but it's done in a way that is it's disruptive to kind of the narrative flow. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, it also does there's a thing where it's like we almost circle back around to the very beginning of the movie. You know what I mean? Like it's cyclical in that sense. So it's really interesting, and I don't know any other film that can pull that one off. But what gives a dead giveaway to me, at least, is the Cubs Club Silencio scene.
where it's all an illusion.
Well, yes,
Yeah.
where it's all everything. There is no band, no hey baño. Everything is pre-recorded. That pretty much is a dead giveaway that what we're seeing are the pre-recorded memories of someone that are played back and augmented in a different way than they were recorded. Case in point, you've got who is the singer who actually sung the song, Rebecca Del Rio, who's performing and lip syncing and then collapses. So fake, but represented as real.
Could you see how some people could say like it's a cop out and could be pissed that this entire movie they've watched up to this point that they had a hard time understanding anyways, that if they understand that, oh, this was all an illusion, a facade, there were skirts of reality in there, but for the most part it was all, just a fantasy. And they say, well, that's kind of bullshit. I've been watching this movie for the last 90 minutes and like I don't know what was real and what was just the imagination of a character in the film.
I mean, I don't think that's a cop out. I think it's a narrative technique, right?
Sure,
Like,
I agree with that. I just wondered if certain
that's
people might
I
fight in that.
think if people think it's a cop out, then this ain't the movie for them. You know what I mean?
I feel that this is a hard film to get into unless you are a David Lynch fan. Like
Yeah.
I love David Lynch, so I was willing to go on the ride and try to figure things out and see what other people had to say about it. Where I could see somebody just renting this movie, because like maybe they like Naomi Watts and they could just go, what the fuck is this, and turning it off halfway.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of those films that if you thought you were getting a sequel to Blue Velvet, you would be mistaken.
Yeah.
And I can see that if you were like, this is going to be a neo noir, just like, Blue Velvet, it's not that. It has those neo noir undertones, but it is more experimental and more surrealist than his other films are. Um, it's not as surrealist as Lost Highway, in my opinion, where that one is one that's like you got to watch at least that 3 or 4 times to
And that's
understand what.
harder. That's
And
hard to
that's
sit through it that many
it's
times. Yeah.
hard to sit through. It's one it's one I've only seen once actually because I'm like, what the fuck did I just watch? But Mulholland Drive, if you give it the time and you're open to the idea that it's not a pure cut and dry narrative, that there is room for interpretation, then you're going to have a fun time. Like, I really believe that. Like it was a movie that I was on the edge of my seat watching, which is good, you know. But it also wasn't boring. Like there weren't boring parts, and it's all wrapped in this whole love story that is also an interesting aspect of it. You know,
Yeah.
and that's something we didn't really talk too much about. One, because we're two dudes, and I mean, there is something to be said about that. You know,
I mean,
um,
the movie is directed by an old boomer white straight man.
yeah,
So,
that is
I
true.
mean, I guess we could approach it from that point of view.
I mean, let's be honest here.
That
I mean, they
yeah,
didn't. I think it is more representative of a relationship between two women than you would see in, say, other movies at this time. You know, like they
yeah,
come together because of a moment of crisis. Is it perfect? No, it's not. Is it realistic? No, it's not. But then again, what else in this movie is realistic?
yeah,
You know, but I think we can all sympathize with grief from a breakup. We can sympathize with the feelings um, of having someone that you cared about, you know, end things, whether you're a man or woman or what. So I mean, that's something that does hit home with Lynch. And let's be honest here, we've all been heartbroken to the point where not necessarily we want to like kill our you know our partner, but we've been heartbroken where we have been in points of despair. I think everyone can relate to that.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Good talk, John. Good talk. Good talk. Final thoughts on these two films before we wrap up.
I think that they are perfect examples of David Lynch. Blue Velvet being a bit more straightforward, and I mean that in a narrative sense because it's full of Lynchian craziness. But really that kind of neo noir, black as a moonless night, kind of thriller film that he does, and where we have Mulholland Drive being, and don't accidentally rent Mulholland Falls with Nick Nolte. Boy, I was pissed off. Um, that was an okay movie, but that's not what I wanted. But you know, very much his like surrealist, Dadaist, weird uh mystery inside a puzzle, inside you know, a box, like where you have to just kind of um really analytically break it down, and you may not even be 100% correct because David took all that to his grave. um but yeah, you know, I would say that those are two very good examples of if you had your introductory drug of Twin Peaks, you know, here's where you can go on to the stronger shit.
And when we say introductory drug of Twin Peaks, we're talking the first season. Because let's be honest here, the second season is hit or miss.
Well, the first 5 episodes, the last 5 episodes are great. It's the 20 in between where
Yep.
David left and Mark Frost did it all.
Yep. When I first saw Twin Peaks and got into it because my wife was like, "You got to check this series out." I was like, "This is really good," and she's like, "Yeah, just wait till you get the second season." I'm like, "Why?" He's like, "Because it goes downhill real fast. It gets into some really weird fucking territory." And she's like, "You just got to watch it all the way through." And I still have yet to watch Twin Peaks: The Return. It's on my list of shows to watch.
Well, if you want weird as fuck, there you
Yeah.
go.
I mean, it's picking up from the season that was weird as fuck. So I kind of imagine that. But yeah, I kind of echo what John said. You know, David Lynch is and was a titan of telling movies that he really wanted you to think about. You know, these are not movies that you can turn your brain off of. I think a lot of times we see movies nowadays where we almost want everything kind of hand delivered to us, right? Like you want, you know, the plot and the characters and what you're supposed to feel all delivered to you. And it's very boring. None of David Lynch's movies have ever been called boring. I don't know any of them that have ever been called boring. Um, did they always land? Not necessarily, but they weren't designed to land 100% of the time. They were designed for the filmmaker, and if you opened your mind up to what the filmmaker was trying to show us through the stories he was trying to tell, then you got it. If you were expecting something that was more traditional in its narrative structure, that was more safe, you probably would be disappointed. And there are some people I've met who've been like, I don't like David Lynch. His stuff's too fucking weird. And I'm like, okay, like you're missing out, because once you open your mind up to it and you like, I'm open to where's Lynch going to take me now? And when you do that, you'll be surprised where you'll end up. Mulholland Drive and Blue Velvet, those are really good ones, I think, to start with. Start with Blue Velvet first, then go to Twin Peaks. I really do believe that Blue Velvet might actually be the prequel to Twin Peaks. I think Agent Cooper is really Jeffrey. He changed his name.
I had to change my name. Yeah.
I had to change my name after my incident in Lumberton, where I was busy boning a lounge singer and also a teenage high schooler.
And like 35 other women, they could not.
And 35 other women in Lumberton, and also I did kill that one guy. Shot him in the head. To be fair, Diane, he was trying to kill me. I'm going to go have a slice of pie and coffee now. But with that said, John, where can they find you at on the internets?
Let's see here. Facebook for now, Instagram. And you can find me over at YouTube at JDubs Video Nasties. Again, if you like my stuff and you're not subscribing or following or ringing the bell or all the stuff, you know how it goes, please do that. It really helps. By this point, my Michael Uslan video interview will be out, the executive producer of all the Batman films. And I am currently writing my So Many Questions on Men in Black. So that's on deck, so to speak.
Nice. I'm really looking forward to that Michael Uslan video, because that's a big get for us Batman nerds.
Yeah.
That's a big fucking get. Well, of course, if you have liked this episode, please do me a favor and share it. Share it with your friends, share it with your family, share it with your fellow Lynchians. Okay? Outside of that, if you want to follow the podcast, do me a favor and go to cinemapsychoshow.com/follow. If you go there, that's our website. You can subscribe to us and follow us on your favorite podcast app. We got buttons all over there just for you to follow on your favorite podcast app. And if you are watching us here on YouTube, hey, thank you so much for doing that. Right there at the bottom, you see that thing there? Go ahead and click the subscribe and the thumbs up and the bell, because YouTube, unfortunately, needs you to do that for our episodes to be shown to more and more people. I know I could see people who have watched this episode. I could see y'all. You've watched it and you haven't subscribed. So please do me that favor. Subscribe to us. It does help out the podcast. And with that said, we will see you next time.
And now it is time for your weather report.